Another enumeration method that is somewhat specific to Windows is NetBIOS-based enumeration. And just a quick review of NetBIOS. It stands for Network Basic Input-Output System and is actually based on the Windows Internet Naming Service, or WINS. And WINS is actually the server part of the NetBIOS process. It operates with or without a WINS server, but essentially provides name resolution to the local network. Now, WINS is not intelligent enough to actually work on the Internet, so it's limited to local networks. It's actually primarily broadcast-based, especially when there's no WINS server present. And it relies on the advertisement and the reply back from broadcasts when systems are looking for information. So a computer would look out on the wire and yell that it needs a certain service or needs a certain computer name, and if the target hears that, it would respond back with the associated information. So it's a very primitive version of name resolution, but advertisements here can be services, roles, and drives. And the nice thing about NetBIOS is that it's enabled by default on Windows systems. Even though most Windows systems today don't even use NetBIOS, they probably are going to be focused toward DNS, since it's the newer version of name resolution and works a lot better. So it's almost one of those forgotten, thrown to the side type services that can provide hackers with lots of great information. One of the most common tools used here is the Nbtstat command. And there are also other various tools such as Nbt Scan and Smb User Dump, as well as Smb Server Information. So we're going to take a look at some of these tools and see what they can do for us. So we're going to jump back over, and this time we're going to spend some more time on our Linux box. And specifically, we're going to look at two different tools. The first tool we're going to look at is the Nbt Scan Tool, which is one of the more popular tools out there. So we're just going to specify to scan a particular system. So we'll pick back up on our Advocate web server. Now, in this particular scenario, we can see that it is running the server service. We can get its MAC address information, IP, and associated name. And we can also see that it's running the IIS service. Although that may seem somewhat obscure at this point, that's actually a pretty good sign. So although it doesn't seem like we've gained much information, if we didn't know it was a server, or we didn't know what its MAC or IP address or even host name was, we can actually determine that at this point. So we're going to take it a step further. We're going to break out our Smb Enum Utility, which is actually a two-part, which is dump users as well as servers. So the first one we're going to do is the Smb Get Server Information. We specify an iSwitch and the IP address, and we want that to be verbose output, so we're going to specify that. Here's another great example. Advocate Web is going to be the server name. It's running Windows 5.0. Again, if we don't know that at this point, this is a great place for us to start. We know it's Windows 2000, and we also know what domain it's a member of. So at this point, we might try to get some user information. And this is really where the detail comes into play of what we're really looking for. There you go. Now the beauty of this is, in addition to telling us the user name, it tells us the abbreviated security identifier. Now let me explain why this is so important. Windows machines, much like Linux machines, have specific SIDs associated to certain types of accounts. An example of this is the administrator, also known as the root account, is always going to be SID 500. So even if I went in and renamed this to guest, for example, you would always know that it is going to be SID 500. So under normal circumstances, if you see the guest operating system, you would immediately assume it's probably disabled, and even if I do get in, it doesn't have a lot of permissions. Well, this one may be named guest, but because it's 500, we know that SID has administrative privileges on the system. And another thing to mention as well, the guest is always going to be 501 on a Windows machine. Now, the actual SIDs associated with Linux user accounts are a little bit different, but in this scenario, we're locking it down to 500 and 501, and we're definitely gaining some good information. We can see we've got a WINS user's account, an Internet user account, and these are actually service accounts that are used to manage various services such as IIS, DNS, and WINS. So as you can see, at this point, we've gained a significant amount of information over and beyond what we knew before. Now we know the user accounts on the system, we know the host name of that system, what operating system it's running on, and even the domain or work group that it's a member of. And we're not even done yet. Let's move over to our Windows box, and we're going to use a built-in utility of Windows called Nbtstat. And you can see the usage instructions here. Lots of options available to us. We're going to specifically use the Nbtstat A command against the specific IP address. Now here's a great example of gaining information about the services that are running on the network. As you can see here, this is actually running in the work group. Its host name is Advocate Web, and you see these numbers associated here. These are various services that are running, and these are well-known hexadecimal codes. Oftentimes, you can actually go look those up on the internet to find out exactly what they mean, but I can save you the trouble in this scenario. These are basically server services and workstation services. So it's actually serving as both, and in this scenario, 1C is telling us that it's providing internet services, meaning that it's a web server. So as you can see, there are lots more information that you can gain by jumping over to the Nbtstat command. And these are just a few of the dozens of available enumeration type tools for NetBIOS.